Welcome back to part 2 of the Supermarionation project interview as part of the Power of Working Together Better series, where I, Christina Griffiths, and Oliver Grig, the project manager on this prestigious project, will be looking at the importance of individual accountability and getting the balance between control and flexibility. Who was accountable for the results at the end of the day? So if it all fell down, who would carry the can?
Ultimately, me. I think if in terms of the overall thing, I would be involved in all of it. You know, if something had gone wrong in any one specific bit, you know, and the boss wanted to shout at someone, I'd have definitely been in the room. But then there would have been various areas of that. Of his rage would have been directed in various different areas, I suppose. If something had been left, or a restoration, or something had been out of sync, or if something had not gone right, or if they'd used the wrong clip of something, or if something hadn't got cleared, you know what I mean? There were various places that it could have gone wrong, and lots of places that could have gone wrong that wouldn't even have been discovered until afterwards. You know what I mean? But there were also lots of places where it could win, so I suppose it can go both ways, but fortunately nothing in the end was wrong, so everyone was very happy.
So how were you able to keep a track of where things might go wrong? Was it a tightly managed type project, or was it based on trust of all the different expert teams?
It was well, I would say it was very tightly managed in terms of certain area. I would say with the nature of a big sort of multifaceted project like that is that there's no one answer to it. Some of it had to be incredibly tightly managed in terms of the releasing and the rights and all of that kind of stuff, just because that's the nature of the beast. You have to provide exact detail with it in terms of time codes and how much you're using of stuff and where it appears, and get everything triple checked and signed off and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff was extremely labor intensive and kind of involved. And then there's other things which the nature of that kind of old boys sort of network is literally done on a wing and a prayer, and chatting to somebody that you've heard from somebody else that might go and hang out at this place. Oh, sorry, my phone's ringing. Let me get rid of that.
No worries.
Myself on do not disturb. Right. Hopefully that will stop. Where was I? Sorry, no, brother. Where do you want me to go from?
Yeah, I was sort of asking you about how you managed this project. Essentially, was it tightly controlled, or was it?
Oh, yes, that was it.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the other parts of it, as I said, some were extremely detailed and had to have a very high level of kind of management and oversight and checking, cross-checking. But then there were other bits that, you know, as I said, the more creative elements of the team would just sort of, someone would walk in and go, oh, some guys sent me this video through the post, and so we'll just bring it in, and someone would just try and clean it up and get it in as best they could, and then hand it over to the other department for clearing or doing whatever else. So there was a real mixture of flying on the seat of your pants and sort of weeks and months of careful planning and organization.
Wow, yeah, I can hear how that might have gone. So did the project come in within budget then? Were you able to do that? Did you have a budget? I'm sure you must have had a budget. But
I did have a budget. My old boss had a slightly relaxed relationship with budgets, to the constant consternation of the financial controller, who I'm not sure how they managed to retain his sanity or hair. But we weren't too bad, actually. Frankly, when I looked at it at the beginning and he told me what the budget was, I thought it was going to be double that, and it didn't come in at double that. So I think I managed to say to keep it pretty tight. In terms of, I mean, we had, as I said, again, contingencies and making sure you've got redundancies and understanding that when someone says one thing, it might not actually mean that. And so I think a lot of it is flexibility.
Yeah, well, it can. Yeah, it can be. It sounded like you had to be flexible because you kind of one end it was all coming in off, as you said, off the fly, and then the other end you having to tightly. You had budget codes and all the rest of it, so you
Yeah,
had
and
to
as I
do.
said, fixed
Yeah.
dates and a box that was only so big, so you could only, they couldn't just keep adding discs. At some point, it was going to run out. So yeah, there were hard things you had to get the square peg and the round holes or whatever it is.
So did you actually have a project plan, and did you follow a methodology of any type, anything like that?
We looked at it in terms of an agile thing. Right, it was a few years ago, and I was less sort of versed on it. It was in fact my first real attempt at doing it, and it I would say it was not a hugely successful agile project, but I think that was because of the slightly wild nature of it. Although thinking about it back, I think it would be the perfect sort of project to kind of do in that way.
Yes.
So more, it was just done on the. I mean, obviously there was a plan, there was a release plan. There always is what we used to call the. Oh God, what was the term for it? Yeah, basically an Excel spreadsheet which detailed everything that was on everything, had everything that was on the discs, the details for what to put on the menus, it had, details of how much it was going to cost and how much the DVD was going to go for. And then obviously we had our website and all of that stuff. So we had marketing and PR around it as well. So yes, there was absolutely a plan, but things just kept getting added to it. I think that's
Of course,
which is,
yeah.
but that, to be honest, that always happened. We used to have things that we used to call there were the general projects. We used to it was like a production line. We released, it literally was a production line. We released DVDs and Blu-rays every week. We released lots of them, like 10 discs a week we used to do, and we carried on doing that while we were doing this big project as well. So there was general stuff as well, and then we used to have these things called Tim projects that were the ones that he cared about, or about a show that he particularly liked, or stuff that he had a vested interest in, and they would always be kind of highlighted in a different color because we knew that they were the ones that at any time he might just come in and go, oh, I found this great thing, or this thing by the same director who directed one of the episodes that I've just managed to unearth and clear the rights for, so we're going to stick that on the special features disc. And we'd be like, what? We locked that down ages ago. It's like, oh, come on, we can just redo it. So we were very used to kind of having to be flexible about that kind of thing. And we all agreed that it would make it better. If there was a chance to get this thing on the project, we would. We all wish that it wouldn't have to be done at the 11th hour, but you can't. If you fix a date and then you just sort of, that's why you kind of keep these things slightly flexible, because you never know when something's going to happen. Otherwise, things don't happen, which is why we had dates. If you don't have dates, it just goes on forever.
Yeah, I can imagine how people were glad to have you as their project manager, because you were on their side, but also trying to make it happen at the same point. And I think people like you are always welcomed into that situation. So you've got cat herding going on as well. So there's cat herding, and you've got having to be massively flexible and resourceful, it sounds like, at the same point, to get everybody working together. So how did you make decisions then? How did they? So it sounds like you had your creative director, Tim. He made the creative decisions ultimately. He was the last buck stop with him, I guess, from what you were saying.
Yes, and as I said, he sometimes needed to be led or guided or kind of managed. I think essentially we tried to say yes to everything, but there was division, sort of, yes is also elastic. There's yes, but only up to a point. Yes, we can have it, but we can only spend this much money on restoring it. Or yes, we can have it, but only if it comes in by this date. Or whatever it is. There's ways of, as I said, creative ways of saying no, or ways of saying yes that still meet within the criteria of it. But I suppose essentially decisions were mine and his. A lot of this, most of them were made by me, but essentially there were the big ones that he could, if he wanted, just overrule me.
I'm deciding that. Okay. And so, did you all get together to make decisions? What was the process of decision making?
We had weekly production meetings with the department heads mostly, unless there were reasons why they couldn't be there, but always with kind of the internal production manager, me, the head of the studio, and Tim generally, although he would always sometimes dial in from wherever he was with varying degrees of success. But in terms of sort of on the fly decisions, either I would have to make them or I would have to call him and discuss it with him. So yeah, normally buck stopped with me, and if I couldn't get hold of him, I had to make a decision that I thought that he would agree with.
Yeah. Okay. I can see how that would work. And in terms of thinking about other types of standards, so non-creative standards, let's just say something technical in the, I don't know, in the film restoration or something. Did each of the production managers then were responsible for the creative standards of each of their own areas, I guess?
Yes, of course. And so essentially each department had a QC, a kind of quality control person. And so at each stage it was checked. And so the restoration team would essentially sign something off and say, we're happy with this. And they'd give it to the production, the DVD production or Blu-ray production studio, and they'd have another run and check over it, and then people would check the disc itself. So they'd all have their own internal kind of approval processes.
So it would happen further down.
Yes, but then you have another set of eyes. Yeah, you'd have another. It would come back up, and there were certain things that, you know, as I said, certain things that Tim would have personal interest in, you know, something like as I said, we did these recreations of some of the stunts and sort of explosions and building puppets and all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, he wanted to be present and all of that and look at the stuff that was being done to it in terms of the post-production, whereas there were other bits that, you know, that'll be good enough and that'll be okay. So yes, there were certainly bits that people would want to see. I mean, I've forgotten how many times I've watched the film itself in terms of, or certainly certain bits of it. Then, you know, there's people doing subtitles, people doing all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a massively multi-pronged attack.
Yeah, so that's why it's interesting to know how the decisions are made and how the quality decisions are made, you know, because it's not straightforward, is it, at the end of the day?
No, and you do have to have a lot of faith in the expertise of the people in those departments, and, you know, whether something is going to be able to get any better. And so there's that making the decision of being, and so that's where you have to have faith in the people, you know. So if you didn't have faith in the restoration team and they came in to give you something and it didn't look very good, and they said, we spent 3 weeks on this and this is as good as it's going to look, and you didn't have any faith in them, you might say, I'm going to take this to another team and then it will look all shiny. Whereas if you know that they do and they say this is as good as it's going to look, you can straight away go, great, thanks, you've done great. You know what I mean? So it is about having the right people.
The right people, yes, of course. So in terms of how you all communicated then, so you did have Tim dialing in. So were they virtual meetings that you had, or were you mainly face-to-face?
Mainly face-to-face. This was way pre-pandemic, and before any of that, we used to generally have him on the phone, you know, one of those triangular phones in the middle of a meeting room. Very much the meetings were in person, although there were normally a couple of people on the phone because, as I said, people will be off filming. We did a lot of filming at Pinewood, and then other people were based all around the place, and designers were based in other places when you had to get them on there. So there was an awful lot of emails as well, an awful lot of emails. This was before we messed around in other things like sort of chat things. There was no chat, but there were definitely long email chains, I will say. I'm very much glad now, and this was also pre sort of, I think, well, not pre Google Docs, but pre we used any of them. So there were lots of attachments and final version. God knows how many final versions. So you didn't have a centralized
place to store everything then?
We had a server, but it was a server, and so sort of an old-fashioned server where you couldn't all get on there and work on it at the same time. If you did, things would break. And so no, there was one person kind of running this production schedule, and so we'd have the meeting and one person would kind of update things for it, and we had dates and things would automated things that things would kind of go red or flash yellow or send warnings on a Monday morning. We used to get this great big list that came out of the production schedule that would be like, all of these things are red, all of these things are this, and so we'd have stuff to look at and think about. But yeah, it was old school in terms of phone calls and emails and face-to-face meetings.
Yeah. And so when you had anything contentious that you had to communicate, how did you handle that?
Normally in face-to-face, very much normally in face-to-face. There were very few difficult there were some difficult phone calls, certainly, but not in terms of that we knew that were going to be, I think. Do you know what I mean? As in, you sometimes would have them that would come out of the thing, but in terms of if you knew you had to go and tell someone to stop doing something because we'd run out of time or money, or go and sort of find out what the hell was going on that seemed to be delaying, it would always be done in person. Fortunately, it was all within most of it. You know, I didn't have to go to Austria or somewhere between Austria and Bratislava, which is where the boxes were made. I never had to go there, but everywhere else was kind of within a reasonable region that I could go. So I went to Pinewood, and I went to the restoration house, and I went to the subtitling people, and I went to the screening rooms, and I went to kind of all of those places. So there was quite a lot of jobbing around London.
Yeah, I imagine that would have been a lot of fun as well. I think
it was fun.
I hope you enjoyed part 2 of the Supermarionation project interview as part of the Power of Working Together Better series. Here we have some highlights for you, and I've written them out here on this slide. So Ollie was talking about how he handled the project by ultimately being the accountable person for the overall results. So whilst other people were responsible for all the various technical aspects of the project, he ultimately was responsible for the overall project results. So he was involved in all aspects of the project and would have been present if something had gone wrong, although he managed to step back and let the experts do their job. The project was tightly managed in certain areas, such as releasing and rights, while other areas were more flexible. Well, he kept track of things where things might go wrong by tightly managing certain areas and relying on the expertise of the different teams where they were experts. Decisions were made by Oliver himself with Tim, where Ollie made most of the decisions. Communication, though, mainly happened through face-to-face meetings or phone calls and emails. Contentious issues were handled mainly through face-to-face meetings. Business objectives were pushed through regular meetings, and there was a production schedule that provided warnings and updates. So I hope you enjoyed part 2. I look forward to you joining me in part 3, where we'll further explore the factors of success to this project.